When I decided to start my first virtual Airbnb in another country, I thought the hardest part would be furnishing the property remotely. I was totally wrong. Before this listing even went live, I dealt with a break-in, stolen electronics, contractor problems, delivery issues, setup delays, and a property management company that made everything harder than it needed to be. At one point, I seriously thought about quitting and taking the loss, but 7 months later, the property is fully running and profitable. So in this video, I'm going to break down how I found this deal, how much money I spent, everything that went wrong, how I fixed it, and whether virtual Airbnb arbitrage is actually worth it in 2026. Because if you plan on doing Airbnb remotely, there are mistakes in this video that you definitely want to avoid. And before we get started, if you like the content we share, then go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you think someone can benefit from this video, feel free to share it amongst your community. So let's get into it. So before this deal, I already been running my Airbnb business locally for years, but this is my first time trying to expand internationally. And honestly, I wanted to challenge myself. I started researching different markets and running numbers on multiple cities. At the end of the day, this particular deal stood out because the numbers actually made sense. Based on my calculations, I figured the setup costs could realistically be recovered around the 9th to 10th month mark if everything went well. And that's important because a lot of people jump into Airbnb because they see revenue screenshots online and think it's an overnight success. But if your numbers don't make sense after the expenses, then the deal is not even worth it to begin with. The market that I ended up choosing was Texas. Now, there were other markets performing just as well, but this one checked all the boxes I was looking for. The hardest part wasn't finding the property. The hardest part was getting someone to actually say yes. I got rejected a lot. And honestly, I understand why. There are a ton of bad operators out there, so a lot of owners and management companies immediately shut the idea down. Eventually, after a lot of calls and negotiating, I found a deal that worked. At least, that's what I thought, because everything looked amazing on paper until the problem started. So after starting the lease and setting over the deposits, things immediately started getting frustrating. There was constant back and forth with the property management about getting access to the property and the garage. And this became a huge problem because I was trying to coordinate deliveries remotely. Furniture, TVs, beds, decor, even electronics. Everything was being shipped to the property while I was in another country. The plan was simple: have drivers place deliveries safely inside the garage. According to the lease agreement, I was supposed to receive full access to the property, including the garage, once the security deposit was paid and the paperwork was completed. It was only after those steps were finalized that I started scheduling deliveries to the property. So from my perspective, I was relying on the terms of a signed agreement. But once everything had been signed and the deposit had been sent, I did not receive access as expected, which led to a lot of back and forth with the property management company and created a situation that I didn't expect. Since I didn't have full access yet, there were times where the garage was left open or deliveries got left outside. And that's where things started to get messy. Some drivers followed instructions, others completely ignored them. So now it's messy, because expensive items are sitting outside the property or are visible inside the garage. And then things got even worse. One Sunday morning, I woke up to non-stop notifications from the security cameras. Someone had broken into the property. Craziest part was, this could have been avoided. The guy actually came back twice in the same night. The first time, the alarm scared him off, but a few hours later he came back, broke into the property, stole 2 TVs before taking off. At that point, I honestly just sat there thinking, what am I doing? I was frustrated, and I seriously thought about walking away from the deal completely. Because now in my head I'm thinking, what if this keeps happening? What if this property becomes a constant headache? What if this whole setup was a mistake? And honestly, this was probably the lowest point of the entire project. But at the same time, I'd already invested so much money into the setup that quitting would have hurt me even more. So I decided to push through and finish what I started. And honestly, after the burglary happened, all the smaller problems didn't even feel as serious anymore. At that point, I just wanted to get the property fully furnished and live. But trust me, problems were still not over. So after the break-in happened, the first thing I did was report everything immediately. I sent the footage over, filed reports, and upgraded the security setup right away. I added more cameras, sensors, and smart security features that allowed me to monitor and control everything remotely. And honestly, this changed everything. Because once I finally got full control over the property and access to the garage, things became way easier to manage. Now I could coordinate deliveries properly, open and close the garage remotely, monitor the setup team, and actually run things smoothly. After that, the setup process officially started. And this is where I realized another huge lesson. Finding decent workers remotely is difficult. Some people were great, others were a complete disaster. The setup team moved quickly, but they rushed certain things and some of the work had to be redone later. Then I hired a stager who honestly gave me a headache. week. I had already provided a full design template showing exactly how everything should look, but instead of following the template, she started doing things her own way. So now I'm on FaceTime trying to explain how I wanted the setup to be done while being in another country, and this virtual setup thing is definitely testing me. Eventually, I had to bring in another cleaner and a handyman to fix everything and finish the job properly. And honestly, that was one of the biggest lessons from this experience. The people you hire can either make your life easy or your business a nightmare. Another challenge I faced was handling payments as a Canadian operating in the US. A lot of workers only accepted payment apps that we don't really use in Canada, like Zelle or Cash App. So there were definitely moments where I felt like every small step became another obstacle. But eventually everything finally started to come together. The furniture was installed, the backyard was finished, artificial turf was completed, smart locks were working, the camera was set up, and the property finally started looking like the way I imagined. At that point, I hired a photographer, got the listing ready, optimized the pricing, and officially launched the property. So let's talk numbers, because this setup was not cheap. The security deposit and upfront costs alone were already expensive. Then came the furniture, electronics, setup teams, cleaners, turf installation, security systems, photographers, legal fees, and all the random surprise expenses that came along the way. By the time everything was finished, I had just spent close to $40,000 getting this Airbnb set up. And honestly, even I was shocked seeing the final number. Now, to be fair, you absolutely do not need to spend this much money starting an Airbnb. I intentionally spent more because I wanted the property to stand out and compete better against other listings in the area. I wanted it to feel unique because in my experience, if your listing looks exactly like everyone else's, it becomes way harder to charge premium pricing. Now, obviously, there were some mistakes that increased my costs, like the work that had to be redone, some people weren't the right hires, and some delays cost me extra money. But overall, despite everything that happened, the property eventually stabilized and started performing the way I originally planned it for. And honestly, getting through all those problems taught me way more than if everything had gotten smoothly. So was virtual Airbnb arbitrage actually worth it? I would say it depends on what your tolerance level is. Through my experience, it would be a yes, but never again would I do any deals with this specific property management company based on how difficult they made things even after everything was already in process. But based on my experience, I would do a lot of things differently. For example, I would have made sure I had full access to the property before sending a single delivery there. I'd also spend way more time screening who I work with, because the wrong management company or the wrong workers can make the entire process 10 times harder. Looking back, I'd also have a storage unit lined up as a backup plan in case the property management company didn't fully honor the lease agreement, like what happened in this situation. But despite everything that happened, this experience actually helped me improve how I operate moving forward. Since then, I've done other deals that went way smoother simply because I learned from all the mistakes in this setup. And honestly, that's the reality of business. Sometimes your biggest lessons come from your worst experiences. So if you're ever thinking of starting Airbnb remotely, hopefully this video gives you a more realistic idea of what the process actually looks like. If you want a full breakdown on how I analyze Airbnb deals before signing them, comment below and I'll make that video next. And if you found this video informative, give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.